today's show, we have the art of the 21st century leadership, from succession planning to building a leadership factory. Let's listen in. Good afternoon and welcome to the Lunchtime Series with me, Kevin Britz, leading the charge with insights and information and ultimately effective results. Joining me today's show for our marketing and leadership segment, marketing and communications expert and co-host Craig Page-Lee. How you doing, Craig?
Kevin, I'm great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm back full swing into 2025. I've been flat out the past few weeks, just like you have, and a good start to the year because one of the projects I've been pursuing for approval landed the day before yesterday. So the rest of today is an absolute flurry of client onboarding and research start and all the rest of it. So yeah, Feb is going to be intense for me.
Great. You know what I've noticed as well is that I'm sticking my head out here and I shouldn't, because I enjoy that. It's almost like a chase. It's a bit of anxiousness, a bit of nervousness, and it's all to do with, gaining the project, pitching for the project, implementing the project. And by the time it's, once the implementation is done, you kind of go, okay, cool. What's the next thing? That there's a tension that is it's a tangible excitement. I don't know if that's how you experience that kind of thing, but it's definitely how I do.
It is great, but then the reality of delivery sets in, and then it's just, balls to the wall and trying to build capacity around you and find the right resources to plug in at the right point, all while trying to manage a budget. So at least there's some value in it.
Yeah, exactly. Craig, so as we end our first month, I can't believe February has already come grinding on. What do we have in store for today's discussion?
Well, firstly, Kevin, to think that on the weekend February kicks in and, tongue in cheek, but soon we'll be hearing guys talking about how many sleeps left till Christmas again,
Yeah, exactly.
So for today's show, I want to continue with last week's topic of leadership, as I came across a really great article on McKinsey.com that warrants being shared and discussed, Kevin. So the article was published late in the last quarter of last year and is titled "The Art of 21st Century Leadership, from Succession Planning to Building a Leadership Factory." And this is the piece that really sort of hooked me. The article was produced by a cohort of contributors, namely Bob Sternfels, Daniel Packthard, Kurt Stravink, and Wayman Howard. This was published to the Strategy and Corporate Finance section on McKinsey.com. What really appealed to me, Kevin, is that it identifies important leadership attributes and provides some best case examples, which are really key to being an effective leader heading into 2025. So a good way to end the January series on leadership. I want to start the conversation by referencing the first two paragraphs, which set some sort of tone for the article. So, leading a global organization in today's fragmented world is difficult, perhaps more difficult than ever. Since the outbreak of COVID-19 and the acceleration of geopolitical tensions, leadership teams have faced an increasing number of uncertainties and disruptions. These include the sudden emergence of upending technologies such as generative AI, the energy transition, and a global workforce seeking more autonomy, empowerment, flexibility, and mobility. There is a compounding and interconnected effect across all these disruptions, and less time for leaders to react to them. We estimate that 10 years ago, CEOs and top teams typically focused on 4 or 5 critical issues at any one point in time. Today, the number is double that. Kevin, for me, it just then therefore goes without saying that the number of critical issues facing the world has obviously increased significantly over the past 5 years. These have obviously got a direct impact on business and leadership.
Great, and I think that more now than ever before in the world, we know changes, at the forefront of everything, and we know that teams have to be agile. And I think, if you thought you were accustomed to change 10 years ago, or you were agile enough 10 years ago, the quick
pace and frequency.
The frequency that you've got to tap into is so, there's no time anymore to kind of think about things. You've got to, how you conduct your day-to-day ability to change for this change happening at this pace. It just has to be an absolute skill that you've mastered.
Absolutely, Kevin. Yeah. So what I did is I quickly did some search on some of the key challenges that businesses and leaders were faced with in 2024 and came across an article on quantitative.com, which is titled Top 5 Business Challenges in 2024 and How to Overcome Them. And what is astounding is the number of challenges that were listed. So I'm going to quickly reference those because you can get to understand the complexity of business and what leadership has had to deal with in changes last year alone. So the first one is creating stability in the age of uncertainty. And the key challenges in this particular realm was inflationary pressures and looming recession or stagflation. The second big challenge was adapting to the future of work, and some of the key challenges here being the gig economy, hybrid work, even bigger challenges to be faced in this topic alone, referencing the likes of Donald Trump, where all government employees are now being forced to return to office full time. I think this is part of the attrition program that a lot of companies are implementing. Change the rules and there'll be a natural fallout, so you don't have to do head cuts. The third challenge was adopting the ESG principles as part of your global business models. Key challenge here being the introduction and adoption of DEI initiatives, which, whilst businesses have been gearing and reading for them, we know that DEI as a concept has now been taken out the language of many big organizations. Again, look at the statements that the USA government has made. The fourth challenge is accelerating digital transformation. Key challenges here being, as we well know, data management issues, cloud computing limitations, data privacy and security issues, and finally, the big challenge of cultivating a robust, agile business, with the key challenges being here, challenger business and as an adoptable organism, and I really like that word, and business becoming familiar with agile goal setting.
Craig, and what stands out to me is the hybrid work. I mean, I hear this all the time where there's an issue about going back to work and people needing people back in the office. So that's a big disruption. Another big disruption is the DEI, like you say, and old Trump doing his thing. But what stands out about this, Craig, and we've covered this topic at length already, is the work and industry neutral growth skills, the wings that we speak about so often. And when you're thinking about the skill of what leaders need around critical thinking and creativity, that is an absolute forefront of your skill set right now. So with those skills cultivated to that degree, some of these things are, you can handle them, but it depends on how well those primary skills are cultivated.
And it also depends on how well leaders understand what skills are required to overcome them and know that they need to lean into organizations like yourself to bring that learnership into the business, because it really is the continuum of learnership at a leadership level as well as management and below.
But what you've mentioned, yeah, and that's what's so interesting to me is that we, as much as the fast pace of interruption and disruptions happening, it's how are humans, how are humans engaged with it? How are humans evolving? How are humans changing? It comes back to us the whole time, and it's like it's becoming more and more and more relevant that you're kind of going, well, if you're not adapting, the people who are the ones that's leading the pack, right? But
I love that, because really, there's often a statement around you are where you come from, you are what you've been exposed to. So when the frequency and rapidity of change happening is, what does that do to you as a persona? Are you constantly trying to readdress and recalibrate to what you stand for and what you align with? Really interesting proposition that.
Craig, so what are the leadership attributes that you alluded to earlier?
So, Kevin, yeah, before jumping into those in detail, I think it's just important to note that the authors have identified distinct differences between these personal attributes, the best practice, and the approach to leadership development required in today's organization. And the article looks at each of these three areas in somewhat detail, and it provides a set, another layer of deep insights to support leadership effectiveness and success in 2025. So let's look at the first area of focus, which is defined as the character of 21st century leadership, personal attributes. And for this area of focus, the authors believe that there are 6 leadership traits that are most needed to excel in today's uncertain environment, Kevin. And yeah, I'm just going to reference directly in terms of the titles and definition of the traits. So the first trait is positive energy, personal balance, and inspiration. And you're really going to love these.
High-performing teams don't just happen, they're built. And at the core of every successful team is a contagious identity. It's more than teamwork, it's a mindset. It's about creating a culture where collaboration is second nature, innovation thrives, and every member steps into their true potential. When teams embrace the correct mindset and contagious identity, they tap into something bigger, a shared purpose, aligned values, and an unstoppable moment that drives high-performing teams. Because when identity is contagious, every team member plays with passion and owns their impact, and thrives in an environment where growth isn't just expected, it's inevitable. A contagious identity is where power meets transformation. For more information, go to kevinbritz.com.
The collection of traits is focused on managers' need to develop and protect the mind, body, and spirit. And it's important for managers to be clear about what makes them tick. Otherwise, they'll not have the energy to learn, as it's talking about, leaning into organizations like yourselves, and lead, especially at a time when the current mobile, post-pandemic, multi-generational workforce is looking for more connection, more authenticity, and more inspiration from their leaders. And that particular statement, in a way, is almost contradictory in the sense that whilst they needing those particular aspects to really lead themselves, they don't want to be in the workplace. And the workplace is really the perfect environment to instill and formulate your response and ability around those 3 particular propositions of connection, authenticity, and inspiration, Kevin.
Yeah, absolutely.
The second trait is servant and selfless leader. And this is a point you often talk about, which is really great. The highest performing leaders observed were focused on making the team and others successful. It's not about them. It's about others' deeds, actions, and outcomes. It's about the organization's mission, deep purpose, and positive impact. And we note here from a recent McKinsey survey of a group of about 1,000 employees, 70% said their work largely defines their sense of meaning and purpose, Kevin. That's a large percentage. The third trait in this particular proposition is continuous learning and humble mindset. The collection of traits is focused on managers' need to develop and protect the mind, body, and spirit. And it's important for managers to be clear about what makes them tick. Otherwise, they'll not have the energy to learn, as it's talking about, leaning into organizations like yourselves, and lead, especially at a time when the current mobile, post-pandemic, multi-generational workforce is looking for more connection, more authenticity, and more inspiration from their leaders. And that particular statement, in a way, is almost contradictory in the sense that whilst they needing those particular aspects this is about leaders not being afraid to take risks. They must be curious. They must learn from their mistakes. Obviously, the highest performing leaders never considering themselves to be at the highest expert level or the smartest person in the room, the no ego approach. And what I really love is the phrase, the superpowers are their humility and willingness to be vulnerable.
Yeah, Craig, as you're speaking through these, I've been working with as you know, a large organization around, we call it the Leadership Specialist Program. So, when we speak around with the specialists around how they lead and why it's important that they do lead, the very first thing that we touch on is purpose, right? A meaning and purpose of why you do what you do. And to your point, 70% of organizations that do find absolute purpose in who they are and what they actually do physically, that's a large percentage, right? So
It's substantial.
and those environments where people simply ignore purpose, and people, or organizations simply, or leaders for that fact, simply ignore, what is the purpose of your teams? Why are they doing what they're doing? And do you ever help them and protect their energy and protect their personal balance and inspirations and aspirations for their lives? If you're not taking that step, you're probably going to have a bunch of people in your environment that leave really quickly, or they just become really unhealthy in that environment, right? And becomes complete toxicity in that organization. So it's people 10 years ago, people think, purpose, like you're going to sit on a rock and you're going to find your purpose. And it's not that anymore, right? To the degree that Simon Sinek says, why do you have to wait until your purpose arrives? Why don't you just decide what your purpose is? And it gives a whole new meaning to kind of go, I can just decide. But if I don't know, I might I might not feel like I belong here. So all these points are so linked and so necessary.
Absolutely, Kevin. And when you know what your purpose is, it just makes getting up out of bed so much more purposeful in the morning. But jumping into the last three traits of the particular personal attributes that the article references. So the fourth trait here is grit and resilience. Leaders do at times need to be steadfast and bold in the face of disruption, Kevin. But such leaders do excel at assimilating the best ideas around them, but they never waver from making the tough decisions when called for. What is right for the business? They don't go into hiding when times get tough. They calmly analyze the root cause of the situations. They adjust their behaviors. They importantly depersonalize from the situation, and then they move forward at the right level with the right place of integrity as well. The fifth trait here is levity, and then this picks up directly on a point from last week's conversation when we spoke about having a sense of humor. We again learned that having a sense of humor does help teams bond, does help at least defuse high-stress situations, and it most definitely helps unlock some of the creativity of the fuller group. Research again shows that leaders with some form of sense of humor are 27% more motivating and inspiring than other leaders, Kevin. And the same research also notes that employees are 15% more engaged when they actually work with a leader versus teams that don't have leaders that have some sense of humor. And then the final trait here, Kevin, beautiful word always, stewardship. And we learned that the best performing leaders take that long-term view. They see themselves as stewards of the organizations and teams for now. They importantly understand that markets will shift. They understand that customer demands will change and that the task of leadership will evolve as the organization does. And with that in mind, they're able to adopt this intentional approach to developing leadership capabilities across the organization, but also deep into the future to ensure success, Kevin.
Yeah, Craig, I go back to the humor. I remember us mentioning fun last week as well, and just have a bit of fun in what you do. And I think, with the world in a situation as it is, yes, some of the wars are calming down, and that's a really good thing. And there has been this big shift for the US, but I have the privilege of speaking to a lot of leaders, and a lot of them are based in the US on the Lunchtime Series. And what's interesting is they don't agree with what's happening. A lot of them don't agree with what's happening in the US. And what's significant about the conversations is we always find some kind of humor in this is happening here, and let's see how this turns out, right? I think when you add humor to just an environment, it really, because we grit and resilience, we absolutely need that. For us to get to where we're going to, where we want to be, it requires a certain type of character that we have. And if it's not a well-established character, you're going to quickly become demoralized and you feel like completely taken aback by situations. And if you throw a bunch of humor at that in the mix there, then it's a winning recipe, right? So
Yes.
I just love all of these because they're really great attributes to have within a working environment.
Fantastic.
Craig, so what are the second focuses that we speak about in this document?
So Kevin, the second area of focus is titled The Craft of 21st Century Leadership, Early Best Practice. Yeah. And here the authors believe that companies are still in the early stages of defining the craft of 21st century leadership, which I found quite fascinating. But several best practices are emerging, and these are defined as follows. The first one that really is emerging is engage rigorously and relentlessly with all key stakeholders. And here the authors note that constructive dialogue and debate will definitely set the best performing companies apart from their competitors. Leaders must, however, instill a culture of rigorous discussion across the organization, including senior leader level, frontline workers, and with the board. And there are obviously different methods to stimulate these conversations, Kevin, especially applicable when needing to address some tough to reverse decisions in the business. And once such decisions are made, leaders must support them with a clear communication, a word that you use frequently in our series, crafting brief, authentic messages that cut through information overload and set out very tangible outcomes that people can actually measure, feel, and see being successful on the journey. The second best practice here is enroll and re-enroll the team. Leaders need to ensure that everyone is totally, and take note, willingly committed to the company's vision and strategy. And this goes beyond that passive buy-in, as individual members of an enrolled team are encouraged to carry the organization's mission. Such employees are therefore self-disciplined, self-motivated, and definitely more likely than others to enforce the standards and correct any deviations from them. Probably one of the most important points in a team situation. Leaders need to continue to revisit the conditions, the behaviors, the motivators to ensure that the correct course is in place and that deep enrollment and participation is achieved, Kevin.
Yeah, Craig, I just want to, the first point you mentioned there is relentlessly, and it's it's a strong, powerful word. For the many sales teams I've worked in already in the last 10 years, one of the things that has served me working with some of the biggest corporates in South Africa is the word relentlessly. And I always say to sales teams, stop having yes, maybe, or no conversations. If you're not having a yes conversation with someone, put down the phone. Right. And even to the stakeholders, right, that relentless going back and kind of going, how do we engage? What are we doing? How do we get back there? Find the yes conversations, because, long term, that is where you want to, that's where you're going to see, it flourish and people really get engaged. Fantastic. And the re-enroll, I think the re-enroll is so important because inherently people are lazy and people love their comfort zones. It's just inherently, it's easier just to do what I know how to do, what I know to do, and pushing the agenda and pushing the mission out there, you have to re-enroll people all the time. That's why, learning and growth is the growth of something is not doing the same that you've always done. It's re-enrolling in the thinking process. So, it evolves and becomes bigger. I think it's a really important, and it comes down to a human quality.
And what I like about that particular point as well, Kevin, is that as change is so dynamic and frequent, it's a chance to recalibrate, bring the team together again, ensure that, you obviously need to do some course correction because you're going to be deviating through this world of constant change. So then is the real proof points of the re-enrollment coming to life again.
And I think that word is the best to use, Craig, is the recalibration, like you're saying. I think because essentially human, we get stuck, we sidetrack, we get pulled away from where we're actually headed. So with that recalibrate, I think it's such an important word, and I think that's a good one to take away from this conversation.
Great. So the final two best practice examples here, the third being build an operating model and establish an operating cadence. Another great word. That's wired for speed. And here we learned that rather than run the business activities through these traditional matrixed organizations and reporting lines, leaders should actually explore models that allow for speed, clearer decision-making rights, fewer layers of bureaucracy, and tech-enabled information sharing. And we learn that leaders should aim to deploy standardization of processes where it makes sense, engage frontline leaders directly, institutionalize best practice through playbooks, training, and other formats, and share information via digital dashboards and other tools. Doing these things will create a performance edge, increase productivity, instant accountability, and substantially speed up decision making. And then the final best practice here is emphasize a culture of trust. Beautiful. A few references were cited for this point, but I really want to quote one that stood out for me, which reads as follows. As American economist and statesman George Shultz wrote for his 100th birthday, trust is the coin of the realm. When trust was in the room, whatever room that was, the family room, the school room, the coach's room, the office room, the government room, or the military room, good things happened. When trust was not in the room, good things did not happen. Everything else is details.
Wow,
So a critical task here for 21st century leaders is therefore to analyze where the organization is strongest and weakest along each element of the trust equation, and then systematically address any of those issues with three approaches: reliability, credibility, and vulnerability, Kevin.
Yeah, and for me, just that last one, vulnerability, Brené Brown does so much work on that. And again, it's as much as it's very often people kind of skew away from vulnerability, it's where the juicy stuff happens and where people actually realize, oh, my manager or my colleague is actually human, and it's based in the vulnerability.
Brilliant.
Greg, so moving on to the third and final area of the focus, what can you tell us about this?
Yeah, Kevin, the final area of focus is defined as the provision of 21st century leadership, and this is preparation for CEOs and organizations. And for this area of focus, the authors believe that some leadership skills can be taught in the classroom, but by and large, the most effective training and transfer of skills happened on the job. And this is something that we truly believe in. They occur in assessments, selection, training pathways of new hires, and through mentorship and apprentices, role modeling and coaching, and other real world interactions. And we firmly, I know you and I talk about this often as there is no better power than on the job learning, Kevin. And there's an interesting angle to this point, as the article references former McKinsey global managing partner Ron Daniel, who coined the term leadership factory. And this really is the piece that hooked me into the article. And he coined this term in the early 80s, which describes the outcome of colleagues investing their time in other colleagues, learning in situ, providing regular feedback, and sharing personal and collective insights. The outcome was defined as this leadership factory, and this was the place where great leaders were produced, Kevin.
Great. Just on that point about modeling, right? part of what we know about human behavior is when you have a structure and a strategy, and you're able to emulate or model someone's structure and strategy, you are able to find similar or same results from someone that you're actually modeling from. So modeling in a leadership capacity is unbelievably important. And if you just paid attention to how people have their success strategy a little bit more often, you'll actually find that there are very obvious behaviors associated to the success that they're actually doing. And you could model that. Anyone could model that. So it's just paying attention.
And Kevin, that's why it's so important for leaders to step in and take on the role of mentoring.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Kevin, there are about 5 attributes that support this particular factory model blueprint. And the first being set the leadership attributes. This is about current leadership teams carefully defining the attributes that are needed in the team and the organization. It's about helping aspiring and high potential leaders understand what leadership is and what it isn't. We know that leadership's not about consensus, but most definitely about alignment. We know it's not about being popular, but it does require some engagement. It's not about working apart from the team, but it does involve making sometimes tough solo decisions. And in each instance, though, it's about managing these polarities and achieving the balance and demonstrating that to the team. So for any leader out there, we know it can be incredibly lonely at times. This does, however, require some extra reserve of confidence, as the authors note, grit, and the ability to compartmentalize, especially when we learn from Douglas MacArthur, who's a former American general who served in World War II and the Korean War, where he notes that the world is in a constant conspiracy against the brave. It's the age-old struggle, the roar of the crowd on one side and the voice of your conscience on the other side. And I really do like that duality that he talks about there. The second attribute here is don't wait, get started now. And you made reference to the likes of Simon Sinek, define your purpose now and get into it. So from the outset, leaders should assign high potential managers to the toughest situations, putting them in those uncomfortable positions and providing them with the right mentorship and continuous coaching to overcome them. The third attribute here is rethink how to build capabilities at scale. Current leadership teams need to build capabilities at scale, particularly through this fast, frequent world of change. They need to create and self-lead personalized immersion sessions for new leaders, take note, and self-lead. They need to compare notes with future leaders. They need to coach them to open up about their biggest challenges, and they need to jointly define how to address them, as lessons can definitely come from anywhere in the business ecosystem, Kevin. The fourth attribute here is lead self before others. Current leaders should invest time and energy to help new and aspiring leaders manage themselves to operate at their personal best. A key learning here is that the feedback loop is a critical starting point for any self-improvement. Feedback allows leaders to change some policies, prioritize resources, and create more support that helps build cohesion, effectiveness, and morale across the team. And then the final and fifth attribute here is empower leaders to build their own personalized, self-driven learning journeys. So from this attribute, we learn that organizations should provide modules on a range of leadership topics, including leading self, leading teams, leading organizations, and using technology to do all three. Again, the ongoing candid feedback loop is important from peers and team members. Again, here, critical to ensure that self-calibration aspect that I talked about earlier on. It'll help raise new leaders' self-awareness levels, prompt their journey towards self-correction, and create development and mentoring opportunities across the organization.
Craig, I think mentorship is so important, and I want to add to this entire attribute, all these attributes you're sharing there. When thinking about a mentor, don't wait for the mentor to arrive. Pick up the phone, send an email, and ask someone to be a mentor. They might say no, but don't wait for it to be the business's decision to kind of go, okay, well, guys, we have a bunch of mentors. If someone's inspiring you, if someone's, having an impact in that environment, go up and ask them, would you care to be a mentor? Because I'd love to learn more, from you. I think those people who actively get in contact with their own ability and actioning that type of approach, those people go 10 times further. Purely based on the fact that, you're not waiting for someone to implement something until it's done. Take the advantage and ask, because you never know. They might just say yes, right?
Such a great point, that, Kevin. Yeah, but it's interesting. It does lead to another challenge in the organization, because those that step in and take self-control and direct their success are often seen as being favorites to leadership level. And, but at the end of the day, it's really just about them being self-aware and understanding what they need to do to advance their journeys.
But essentially, Craig, once that happens, and because I've done this so many times with so many organizations, when everyone starts understanding that there's an actual culture of wanting to coach and mentor in that environment, that favoritism bias that generally shows up kind of starts dissipating. You're going, no, this is not about favoritism. It's about who's actively wanting to be mentored and coached. And suddenly the reasoning shifts behind it. And yes, it can be tricky, but yes, it's necessary, right? So it's finding a nice balance between that and doing it, in a way that everybody then eventually benefits from it.
Yes, absolutely. So Kevin, to close from my side today, I just want to quote a paragraph from the final section of the article, which focuses on preparation for CEOs and organizations. And this reads as follows. To facilitate development of 21st century leaders, today's CEOs will need to think of themselves as chief talent officers. They will need to do the following. Help identify and stay close to the highest potential leaders in their organizations. Make personal connections with managers several levels below. Take care to protect the mavericks in the organization, the managers who, to quote, unwittingly or not, may stray from traditional processes and protocols, as these individuals may well be the very leaders who guide the organization into the innovative future.
Yeah, Craig, and I think that's such a significant point, that just that name of the chief talent officer.
Yes.
Because, at the core, and there's so many leadership books that promote that. So it's not about having all the knowledge. It's about having the right team in your team. Who's the right people for the job, and surround yourself with people that are better at some things than you are.
Absolutely.
So cultivating that, I think it's a fantastic point. So, it's the art of 21st century leadership, from succession planning to building a leadership factory. I love that. And we will share the link in the description boxes below, guys. So, and the quote for today, Craig, is from the 1970s, from a man called Ralph Nader. And he says, the function of leadership is to produce more leaders, not more followers.
Wonderful, wonderful. And that's really talking directly to this particular article. Fantastic.
Exactly. Craig, thank you so much for today and for the insights. It's always so much fun, and I'm so excited that we're already kicking it off in the year and rock and rolling. Please remember to like and share and tune into the Lunchtime Series every week, Wednesday and Thursday. For myself and Craig, have a fantastic week. Craig, I will chat to you next week.
Fantastic, Kevin. Have a good one ahead. And yeah, go and land those great deals you're working on as well.
Fantastic. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Ciao.
Cheers.